Welcome to Coffee with Kish. Wonderful. All right, so today I'm going to talk a little bit about interesting encounters that I've had in my time as a Mormon. The Mormon world is a small world. Yeah, millions of people around the world, but the world has billions of people. Okay. But what that means is if you're running in Mormon circles, you run into all kinds of interesting people, other Mormons or people who connect with Mormonism in some way. So that can provide you some crazy access at times to interesting things. And so I'm going to tell you about 3 people I encountered, and they're brief encounters. They're not a huge deal, but they're interesting encounters. Mostly because the people I encountered are interesting people. The first one is the LDS president, Thomas S. Monson, the former LDS president, Thomas S. Monson. I grew up with Monson being in the first presidency for many years under Gordon B. Hinckley. I lived through the Hinckley presidency, of course, and Thomas S. Monson was a fixture in that presidency and then became president of the church. And he was infamous for telling stories about how he served all of these widows as a bishop. And it seemed like every conference he was telling a new story about a dear widow. And it kind of became something that you would joke about because it got old and repetitious. Now, that said, I'm fully in support of drawing attention to the needs of elderly people who might be lonely because people aren't coming to visit them. I anticipate that I'm going to be lonely when I'm an older person. My kids are moving out right now, so I'm supporting, as a future empty nester, I am in support of these stories, but they did get to be a little too repetitious and numerous. He did the ribbon cutting of the billion-dollar financial LDS project for rejuvenating downtown Salt Lake City, the City Creek Mall. He cut the ribbon on it and said, "Let's go shopping." And I don't know, the prophet of the LDS Church telling people to go shopping in a billion-dollar mall project, whatever. But it's not like I hated the guy, right? I don't like everything that he did. Clearly, some of it disturbs me more than other things, but I thought his work for bringing attention to widows, elderly people, lonely elderly people in the church was an important and good thing. So how did I meet President Monson? Well, I met him twice, or I encountered him twice, you might say. The first time was at a BYU Society dinner. What is a BYU Society dinner? Well, alumni of BYU have these regular events in cities around the country and maybe around the world, I don't know. There's an organization here that I don't really belong to or participate in, even though I've got 2 degrees from BYU. But I had this bishop, really great guy, successful businessman, computer programmer, had his own private plane, really a fun person who kind of took me under his wing and helped push me out into the mission field. And I say push, but as you know from past installments of this show, I very much chose and wanted to go. It's just that, he was there kind of shepherding me along and encouraging me. And I think taking me to these BYU Society dinners was one way of doing that. Now, President Monson, on the other hand, when he came to speak at the BYU Society dinner, I made an effort to go up and shake his hand, which is not something I really often do. I'm not a big celebrity follower. Generally speaking, I don't go out of my way to get autographs and shake hands and so forth. But for some reason on this occasion, I thought, hey, I got in line to see President Monson. And, I knew he was a tall guy, right? Because he looks like a tall guy. But I didn't really appreciate the mass, the giantness of President Monson. I think of the guy now as a giant, a huge person. It's towering over me. That's what it felt like to meet President Monson. So I get up in line. As I'm going toward him, he just seems to get bigger and bigger and bigger until there's this feels like there's this giant guy looming over me. And then I feel like if someone pushed him and tipped him over, I'd be in real trouble. Would I survive this? I don't want to exaggerate, but I just did. But the thing that really got me is he reaches down to shake my hand, and my hand just gets lost in this gargantuan Monson hand, the Monson paw. Because he's like a giant bear. Have you ever seen those big stuffed statues of bears? That's what it was like. It was like walking up to a huge stuffed statue of a bear and then feeling like it could topple over on you at any moment. And that was it. That was my encounter. He said hello to me. I can't even remember what I said. I mostly remember the giant hand enveloping my tiny little hand, and that was it. That wasn't the only time, though, that I encountered President Monson. The other time was when I interviewed for a job at BYU. Yes, that's right. Kish interviewed for a job to teach at BYU. Well, as part of your interview process, if you apply for a job at BYU, is you have to interview with the general authority, and it's ordinarily just a 70, just a 70. 70s are, they're substantial people usually in their own right. They're usually successful in their profession, or as executives in the business world. They've made quite a bit of money, and they can afford to dedicate all of their time to the business of running a global organization. Well, I got, assigned to meet with a particular 70. I'm not going to humiliate this person or tarnish their legacy in any way by naming the person. But I drive up to Salt Lake, to Temple Square, that area, park in the underground bunker-like parking lot that's connected to the church office building complex. I'm, waved in by a Secret Service looking like security guard who's giant football player sized guy with a dark suit on who looks like he could, co-host Hannity or something. And he's got this little communicator in his ear, and, he's taking directions and waving me in. And then I make my way up to the old church office building. So I go in. It's a lovely old building. It's, wood paneled, marble, all the stuff that I like in architecture in the modern era. Well, the early 20th century or late 19th century era. But I go up to the office of this general authority. We have a wonderful time talking, and he prophesies, and this is why I'm not going to share his name. He prophesies that I will work at BYU. I almost feel like he's offered me the job. He's like, you will work. He said, I prophesy. Isn't that strange? He actually said, I prophesy that you will work at BYU. I was like, whoa. I mean, I could tell at that point that my interview hadn't gone so well on campus. I wasn't really ready. I wasn't even really done with my degree yet. I was still writing my dis. They wanted me to teach a Latin class, and I hadn't really done that for some time, so I wasn't well prepped to teach Latin. And it showed. They didn't like what I said. I could see furrowed brows in the room, and they had a whole contingent of people, of course, to watch me teach, which is what you do. But it was my first campus interview for a job, and I didn't do that well, honestly. I did well in the job that I got, so everything worked out for me, but at the BYU one didn't go well. So when he says, you're going to have this job, I was like, wow, okay, well, I had always felt like this was what I was supposed to do when I first entered this whole thing as a BYU student. And so, it felt like, okay, yeah, I felt like this was going to happen. I thought that's what the divine will had lined up, as it were. sounds incredibly presumptuous now, but so I took him seriously. And it didn't pan out. But as we were walking down from our interview, a great interview, he started giving me the tour. He showed me the big sort of boardroom environment in which the leaders of the church meet, the apostles in the first presidency. He has paintings of past presidents of the church along the walls, wood paneling, beautiful long table that, you know, kind of hugs the sides, the walls there, where all these big chairs, you know, that's where the apostles and members of the first presidency sit. And he told me about the church office building, how past leaders of the church were actually buried underneath the thing, kind of like, you know, popes in the Pantheon in Rome, or in medieval cathedrals, basilicas, etc., etc. I thought, wow, that's wild, really wild. And I remember he was shaking my hand to say goodbye, and he said, "You've shaken the hand of the man that shook the hand of the man that shook the hand of the man who shook the hand of the man, blah, 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 that shook the hand of Joseph Smith." And I was like, wow, I know it sounds kind of corny, but at the time it was kind of affecting, really. I thought it was a fantastic meeting, but I was just about to leave, and suddenly I look down the hall and I see President Monson and President Faust standing at the elevator, and they looked up at me and they waved. So I thought, wow, this is going to happen. I'm going to work at BYU. It just it didn't happen. It didn't happen. But those were my Monson encounters. The next encounters were, I would say, kind of freaky in a bad way. The first one was with Cody Judy. Do you know who Cody Judy is? Maybe you don't. I mean, he wasn't such a, you know, big national news figure. But Cody Judy threatened the life of President Hunter. Do you remember when President Hunter was president of the church for a brief period of time? Yeah, well, President Hunter went in February of 1993 to give a devotional at BYU. There were about 15,000 plus people in attendance, and suddenly in the middle of his talk, this guy jumps up and holds what looks like some kind of device to set off a bomb to President Hunter's head. And he's puts this manifesto or revelation before President Hunter and tries to force him to read it. Well, the manifesto was a revelation, I guess, that Judy received that was declaring by the will of God, by the command of God, that Cody Judy be the new president of the church. Of course, Hunter didn't read it. People start in the audience. The students started spontaneously singing, "We thank thee, O God, for a prophet." And I think that confused Judy, because he probably thought this was aimed at him when it was aimed at President Hunter. And then people tackled him, and end of threat. Cody Judy was convicted of his crimes later that year, like in July or June, it may have been June, goes to prison. Well, as fate would have it, for a brief period of time, I was trained as a psych tech at the prison where Cody Judy was incarcerated. And as part of my training, I was taken on a tour, and during that tour, I met Cody Judy in his cell, and I was like, mind blown, this is Cody Judy. I mean, at the time, he was big news. And I wasn't the only person in my acquaintance who met Cody Judy, but the son of the bishop who helped me get on a mission, the one who took me to the society, BYU society dinners, that got me meeting Monson for the first time. His son worked for the University of Utah newspaper, and he met Cody Judy to interview him, and Cody Judy gave him a personal revelation. So my friend got a personal revelation from Cody Judy, the man who threatened President Hunter. So that was another crazy encounter. The final crazy encounter was with David Brian Mitchell, or is it Brian David Mitchell? The guy who kidnapped Elizabeth Smart. How in the heck did I meet the guy who kidnapped the poor, but really strong and resilient and resourceful Elizabeth Smart? But how would I meet this dude? Well, I have to say, I met him before any of that nonsense, but well down his trip down crazy lanes, certainly. I was in Salt Lake because I love to do that as a BYU student on the weekends. My friend, the son of the bishop, who was working at the University of Utah's newspaper, he was up there. We'd go out, go see movies and stuff together. I saw Blade Runner, the re-release of Blade Runner with him, not Mitchell, but with my friend in Salt Lake City. But, one weekend I was up there to visit the Salt Lake Public Library, and I walking out of the library, and I think it must have been maybe 1996 or 7-ish, and it was a cold day, so it was probably in the winter time, and there's this guy dressed in some kind of freaky I want to live in biblical times costume. It looked like a costume to me. There on the corner opposite the library after I exited, and he's just standing there, and he's really right in my path as I'm heading back to my vehicle. I walk across the street, and he comes up to me and he says, can you help a servant of God, or can you help the work of God, or something like that? And I was like, I'm kind of a softie when it comes to panhandling, even if the person looks like they're kind of off their rocker, maybe even more so. But I looked at this guy and I thought, what's his deal? This is kind of weird. He's kind of disturbing me, kind of off-putting aspect to his face. So I reached into my wallet and pulled out a buck. I just gave him a buck, and he was like, "Oh, thank you. You've helped the work of the Lord, and you will be blessed." And I thought, well, I doubt that, frankly, but I went on my way. But how did I know it was Mitchell? Well, when I later saw Mitchell's picture, I saw a picture of him as the captured kidnapper of Smart, and he was in the particular picture I saw. It was the same guy, dressed the same way, with the same facial hair, obviously middle-aged white guy who looked like he was trying to be an extra in a Bible movie or something. And it slightly shook me up. So, but that's Mormonism, is a small world. Who are you going to meet? You never know. Church leaders, you could meet a big-time church leader. You could meet someone who thinks they're a prophet. And you probably encounter a lot of those in Mormon circles without even knowing that you've encountered someone who thinks they're a prophet. But then there are those few real criminal cases, the real crazy guys who think they're prophets and commit frightening crimes. And I happened to have very close encounters with two of them. Well, that's Coffee with Kish.